Welcome back, crew, to the next video in our series. In this video we go over the speaker wire installation and some of the future proofing methods that we use. As always, if you would hit those like and subscribe buttons, help me keep fresh content coming to you. Enjoy the video. The next step in our project here is to work on the rough end for the speaker wire and the electric wire. I'm a little bit ahead of myself here because over on the right I still have a closet that I have to frame, but a lot of the stereo equipment got delivered. So if we take a look over here, right where I was going to frame that closet, we have a bunch of equipment that's stacked there. Usually what I like to do is get all my framing done first, that way I can put away my framing tools, my framing rig, then work on all the electric at once, and then hit the sheetrock and do that in sequence. But in this case here, I'm going to roll with what I got. It's not like I'm doing the whole house, it's a whole 15 feet away, so not a big deal. We'll start with the wiring in the section behind me. Once we get that stereo equipment moved, then I'll go ahead, I'll frame that out quick, I'll show you how I do that, we'll hit the wiring in that, and then we should be good to go to move on into sheetrock and some other cool stuff. With this behind me, it's a little more than just running the wires wherever we can get them. One of the things I want to do with this is I want to future-proof it, and I kind of went back and forth with the customer on what the quickest way and what the most cost-effective way is. And certainly the quickest and the most cost-effective would be just running wires where I can get them, get the speaker wires for both sides, get the power wire going down for the TV and the center channel speaker. The problem we run into is what works for stereo equipment and for home theater today may not work tomorrow. Well, it'll work tomorrow, but it may not be the best thing 5 years from now. It may not be the best thing 10 years from now. Right now everything we have is, HDMI. That's been the latest and greatest thing for well over a decade now, almost 2 decades for that matter. Speaker wire, there's been advancements. You have your different plated styles of wires, and there's, the go-tos in the industry. But again, that's all subject to change, and who knows? Right now we're going to run this for just, the surround speakers. But what if a few years from now we want to run a lot more than that? What if we want a whole wall of speakers here, and we want another subwoofer system on each side? We want to be prepared for that. So instead of going and planning on drilling holes in the sheetrock and having to patch that and trying to repaint and all that, I talked to the customer and we're going to run conduit up into the ceiling, and I'm going to run conduit drops for the speaker wire on both sides for both the subwoofers and the surround speakers, and then right here in the center for the center channel for the HDMI. And I'm going to use a little bit bigger than what I need so it's easier, and I'll pre-run some jet line into that. So if we ever have to get another type of wire through there, if we have to replace one, maybe use a bigger wire, all we have to do is just hook it up on point A, pull on point B, and we're going to be good to go. And you'll see when we do those speakers, they're pretty hefty in-wall speakers. So once you take those out, you're going to have a good 8-inch hole to get in there, maneuver around, and work your hands. So as we move forward to put our conduit in and do our future proofing and run conduit drops for the left and right and the center areas, what I want to do is I want to cut a few inspection holes. Now over on the left and right sides, we have some pot lights, so I can pull those down. I have a little room to work. But over here, there's really not much, and I have to, get a pretty good distance. I got to glue some fittings together. So I'm just going to open up the ceiling a little bit over here, and then over on the right a little bit. Our sheetrock work hasn't even really been started yet. And as you see, you have the open wall behind me. We have exposed ceilings on other parts. I still have to put all that up. It's still got to get taped and all that. So if we're going to go ahead and we're going to open things up and have things we have to re-sheetrock, now is the time to do it. my conduit for the speaker wires, I'm going to work on mounting the conduit runs to the ceiling joist. So I'm going to use a couple things for that. First one is this here called an eye-lag. So you can get that in the camera. These are traditionally used for running drop ceilings or running the suspension cable down and holding up the beams. So I have some of these left over from another project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these into the joist probably every two, and then use the suspension cable that you would use for a drop ceiling and just twist that around each piece to keep it suspended. So I'll try to use PVC clamps where I can to actually anchor that PVC to the joist. I really don't have a lot of room to screw things in, so I have to get a little bit creative, hence why I'm using these eye-lags. To actually screw these in, they make a special adapter for your bit. You can get these at any of the box stores or probably Amazon. It's just a bit for the eye-lags, and it adapts in here, and then I can use my impact driver and drive those home. We're just going to use some 12 gauge suspended ceiling wire hanger to move this along. While you're working with this, I strongly suggest wearing gloves. The ends on this cut are very sharp. As you can see as I'm pulling this through here, it's very easy to cut yourself. You know, even when you're up working overhead, twisting this stuff, make sure you're not nicking your forearms. You know, I'm sure there's already people writing in the comments, why don't I just clip the wire ties off? I could do that, and I would do that if I thought I was using this whole roll. But the problem is if I clip those, this entire spool is going to go right out, and I just really don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to take out the little bit of section that I need, cut it off, and the rest of the spool will stay intact. You can get lighter gauges of this stuff. It's easier to work with. But because I'm more than likely going to be stacking 3 pieces of conduit on top of each other, that's all held by this, I want something a little more substantial. You will notice in these segments I'm using PVC glue for my conduit. I'm using the gray PVC cement that's made for electric conduit, so I don't need a primer and glue. For the plumbing applications where you have water under pressure or drain lines, you do need to use a primer and glue. In this one here, it's an all-in-one compound. Don't overthink it. Cut your pipe, clean the burrs off the end with either your thumb or a utility knife. Hit the male end, hit the female end, press them together, give it a little twist, let it hold for about 10 seconds, let everything fuse, and you're all set to move on. So you can see here at this point in the video I'm using some flex conduit. There really wasn't a whole lot of space to work up there in that joist cavity. There were some really tight corners. I had to end up using the flex. In a perfect world, I would use all hard conduit just because it's a little easier to fish wires. In this case, I had to use the flex, no big deal. A lot easier than trying to force the fittings that just won't fit. Okay, so you saw there in that last section how I was fishing in the jet line to go through our conduit poles, and then I'll use that jet line to pull the speaker wire through, which we'll do next. Before I get to that, I just want to point out something on just the direction of fishing and direction of line pulling. If you look at our openings here, We have the fitting here. This could be any fitting. It could be the female end to a piece of conduit, could be a 45, could be a coupling. But if you look on the inside of there, that inside diameter, that inside where that kind of narrows down, versus the width of the wall on our standard piece of conduit there, this inside diameter is just a little bit more narrow. Sometimes it'll actually create a shelf because this is a little bit thicker, and then your fish line can actually get caught on there. Depending on the angle in which these form and the angle in which the fish tape is going through, you know, it's coiled up inside of that reel, and then you have 90s and different fittings that's going through. Sometimes it can just get caught on this edge that's inside the fitting. So there's a couple ways around that. You can just keep working it. Eventually, if you keep working it back and forth and slamming it through, you'll get it through. The other thing to do is to kind of play your direction of the conduit there. So here we know our shelf is going to be on this side. So if we start pushing our fish tape through, we could very well hit a snag here. But if we come through this side here, we're actually going to overlap that shelf and then go down. So kind of the same thing on how a shingle, the water flaps down over the shingle. Remember from earlier, I'm going to have multiple wire runs running in these conduit drops behind me. On the left and right sides, I'm going to have 2 sets of speaker wire. That's going to be for the left and right surround speakers, and then those in-wall subwoofers that are going to go in the bay next to it. So I'm going to need 2 sets of speaker wires for that. And then behind me, I'm going to have a set of speaker wires, an HDMI cable, and then 3 Cat 6 cables just to future-proof any sort of networking or added devices I'm going to need. Now the kicker to that is I'm also going to run a piece of jet line to future-proof. But I don't want to run one set of wires and then try and pull my next set of speaker wires through that. And the reason is because of that friction that's going to be imparted on the speaker wire. So I'll just show you a quick example here. If I pull just one set through, and then I go to pull a second set of jet line through, and I go to do my second set, the way this goes with the curves and all that, there's a tendency for that jet line to get wrapped around the speaker wire like so. You know, I'm exaggerating this here, but they can get wrapped around going through the curves in the conduit. So if I have a lot of pull on this cable, and I'm pulling really hard, and let's say we're on an elbow bend or something like that, and I'm just constantly pulling with a lot of friction against that wire, I'm going to give you an example of what can happen here. So let's see if we can get that to self-focus there. Come on, there we go. So you can see right there, just a few pulls on that jet line going around there, burnt through the outer insulation and then through the inner insulation. You saw just a couple pulls of that jet line wore me down to bare wire. That really didn't take a lot. So if I had one set of speaker wires through there and I was trying to pull my second set through and we were, you know, tightened up against this, wrapped around on a bend or something, I could very well wear through my wire. Certainly not something I want to do. If I do my initial pull through, I'm going to hit all my wire drops at once. So on the left and right sides, it's going to be 2 sets of speaker cable. On the center channel, it'll be those 3 Cat 6s, the HDMI, and the speaker wire. It's going to be a little bit to pull. I'll probably rig up a system to, you know, show you a way to do that by yourself to make it a little easier. But I'd rather do that than risk the wire. And I already know what you're thinking. If I'm doing all my wire pulls at once, because I'm worried about the friction of the jet line on the wires going around the bend or, you know, existing in the conduit, why am I future-proofing it and why am I running a second set of jet line anyway to lay there dormant? Very good question, and that's kind of a 50-50 chance it may work to pull. Let's say I have a lighter speaker wire, or maybe I need to run a Cat 6 cable. I might just be able to go through and pull that enough to get it to go through without friction. But if I was doing that wire pull and I felt a lot of friction on there, I would stop and I would start from square one. And in this case here, it would probably be pulling the old wires out, wrapping my new one in, and then doing the entire wire pull back through. A little more work, but again, we're setting this up to future-proof it. That's why we have those conduit drops. I'd rather do that than risk what's inside the wall, and I'll have that discussion with the customer. You know, I would hope it would be me that would return to do any, you know, additional things that they needed, but this way if they're doing it in the future or they bring someone else, they can at least know, hey, that stuff is in there, this is what might have to happen to replace it or add something in. My next step is to rough measure through the ceiling how long I think I'm going to need my wires to be, and then go ahead and cut those down to length and then tie them up and do my poles. Normally I would just leave everything attached to the spool and just do my wire pull from there and just pulling it off of the spool. But in this case here I need to do it all at once, so I'm just going to go ahead and rough measure. I'm going to use a little bit more wire, but again, better to use a little bit more wire than to sacrifice it and possibly wear through it. As I'm doing this, I'll just make sure to give myself a good couple extra feet on the ends. That way I know I'm not going to run short when it comes time for final hookup. If I were to just go ahead and start pulling this from the other side, there's quite a bit of weight here, and it's just going to be a little tough to pull. Certainly doable. It's obviously a lot easier if I have a helper who's pushing these wires up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a fake helper. Just pound a nail in a couple inches here. And then what I can do, I can loop my wire onto there like so. And that will take up some of the tension that's on the floor and take up some of that weight. So it's essentially this loop here that I'm pulling. So I can pull that through, re-loop it, pull through, re-loop it, and then eventually once I start getting more wire through, it's going to be easier to pull and I won't need to do that. I got my run jet line. Do a little trick here. Just take a scrap piece of conduit, wrap the jet line around a couple times and hold it. Gives you a little pulling stick, just gives you some more bite on the line to pull through. Makes it a lot easier. I think we're going to have enough of that pulled through now to where I don't necessarily need to keep looping it on my nail helper trick. Just keep slowly and easily pulling it through.
Once you start getting more of that going through the wire.
It's weird because you have more of the wire actually going through the conduit, but the friction actually reduces. There we are. So there we go. You can actually see how easy those pull through once you're pulling on the wire, not the jet line. As you can see, no damage on the wires. The only damage that's there is that friction thing that we created earlier for the example. We have a little more room over there. Let's go a little bit more. You can always pull back if we need to. We're going to coil these up in the ceiling for the time being anyway. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's go check our room at the other end. The only thing I forgot to do, because I was rushing this and paying more attention to the video than my work, is I forgot to mark which one of these is going to be for the subwoofer that goes here, and which one's going to be for the surround speaker that goes here, and that's going to matter when we wire these into the receiver in the end. So what I'm going to do, I'll move the camera. I have the other wires hanging over there and I can see them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tape one of those so I know I can see which one is taped, and I'm going to slowly tug on it and just pull it back a little bit. And I'm going to figure out which one is which, and then I'll go ahead and I'll mark them accordingly. The other thing I forgot to mention earlier is I'm also going to run a length of coax cable along with my HDMI and my Cat 6 cables. I'm probably not going to need that because over in the AV closet is where I'm going to have the cable box, and then that will connect with a coax connector and then HDMI from there to the main receiver. More into that when we wire the receiver. But for the future, again, going into that whole future-proofing concept, I'd rather run the wires now in case I need them later. There is always the potential I could want a cable box here with the TV. So I'm just, coax cable's cheap enough. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to run another length of coax along with my other wires. Some will tell you that you shouldn't mix the different type of cables, you know, the AV cables, the power cables, they should all be separate. In this case here, whether it's the coax cable, my HDMI, my Cat 6s, all of them are extra shielded cables. They're designed to be run in the same pull of conduit for situations like this. They have extra shielding and extra protection inside the wire to make it so you don't have that electromagnetic interference. Just for clarification here, I used the term power cable. I was referring to the speaker wire, not a 120 volt household current wire. If you were doing something at that level, you would not want to run that into the same conduit or around the AV cables. That will cause electromagnetic interference. You'd want to run that outside of the conduit, preferably on the opposite side of the joist. My cables here that we're going to go ahead and run down this center conduit channel here, and I used a bigger conduit for that because I knew I'd have a bigger bundle of cables. So we got the speaker wire for the center channel surround speaker, coax just in case we need to drop a coax drop here in the future and put a cable box in. 3 Cat 6 cables that for right now I'm not going to use these, but they're there just in case we need them. And then the HDMI cable. And the HDMI cable is actually one of the big reasons for the Cat 6 cables. HDMIs, especially longer runs, are kind of known to fail over time. So if it becomes not an option to put an HDMI cable in and snake it back through if it just becomes too much work, there are systems in place. You can actually use the Cat 6 cables and do receivers on both ends, and it kind of doubles as a almost kind of like a receiver feed for an HDMI cable. So we're going to pull all those at once, and because I know I have a little extra speaker wire in there and the speaker wire is a little more resilient, I'm going to be doing my pulling off of the speaker wire. So I extended that out a little bit. I'm going to use some painter's tape and just tape the edge to protect the end of the cables, specifically the HDMI cable. That's a very sensitive end. We want to make sure that that's free from any snags in the conduit or anything like that. And then I'll tape this end with electric tape so it's a little stronger. And then what I'll do is as we go down the cable here, every couple of feet, I'll just do a single wrap of painter's tape to kind of keep my cable bundle together so it's not getting snagged. And then as I pull it through, I'll peel those pieces of tape off so that the wires are free on the inside and I can pull one through to replace it if I need to. What I'm doing here, because I forgot to do it on the other side and have to trace the wire back, is remember we have the 2 wires here. We have one for this will be our right channel surround sound speaker, and then the other one will be for the right side subwoofer. So I just want to go ahead and mark this wire now, just with a couple pieces of red tape. And then when I get them pulled through on both sides and I label my wires, I'll know that with this pole here, the ones with the red tape are the same wire. for watching. As always, if you could hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you with the next video. Take care.